I will never forget that April afternoon. The sun was streaming through the large windows of my living room while I arranged the white roses from my garden in a crystal vase that had belonged to my mother. 67 years of life had taught me to appreciate these small moments of peace. Since Edward, my husband, passed away 5 years ago, leaving me this mansion in the hills and a considerable fortune, I have learned to find comfort in solitude. Or so I thought. The doorbell rang with that insistence that could only mean one thing. My daughter-in-law, Michelle, always arrived like that, like a hurricane, without warning, without asking if it was a good time. I took a deep breath before opening the door. "Dearest mother-in-law," she exclaimed as she walked in, without waiting for an invitation, leaving a trail of expensive perfume that I had given her myself for Christmas. "I have wonderful news." Her enthusiasm immediately put me on alert. Over these years, I had learned that Michelle's enthusiasm usually meant problems for my bank account. "My brothers Ryan and Alexandra decided to come visit us," she announced while pouring herself a glass of my lemonade without asking. "And not just them, my cousins are coming too. You know, the ones from Chicago, the ones from Houston, and the ones from Seattle." Something inside me tensed up. "How many cousins exactly?" 18, she replied with a radiant smile as if she had just announced that she had won the lottery. 18 cousins. Some are bringing their partners, of course. It will be a wonderful family reunion." The glass almost fell from my hands. "And where do you plan to house so many people, Michelle?" Her laugh echoed through the entire living room, that laugh she used when she thought I was being naive. "Well, here, mother-in-law. Where else? Your house is enormous. It has 10 bedrooms. It will be perfect." It was not a question. It was not a request. It was an announcement, a decree, as if my house, my space, my sanctuary was simply an extension of her possessions. "When do they arrive?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure while I felt the ground moving beneath my feet. "Next Friday. They will stay for a week." 1 week. 20 people or more invading my space for a full week. People I barely knew, who had never bothered to call me on Christmas or on my birthday, who only knew about me through the stories Michelle told them about her millionaire mother-in-law. "Michelle, this is very sudden. You should have consulted me before inviting so many people." Her face changed instantly. The smile disappeared, and that expression I knew so well appeared. The wounded look, the eyes slightly watery, the lower lip trembling subtly. She had perfected it over the years to manipulate my son, Charles, and when he was not there, to manipulate me. "I thought you would be happy to have the house full of laughter and life," she said with a broken voice. "You always say you feel lonely. Besides, aren't you the one who always talks about the importance of family?" There it was, the masterstroke. Using my own words, my own values against me, making me feel guilty for wanting to protect my space, my peace of mind. "Of course I value family, Michelle, but this is not about a casual visit. We are talking about 20 people living here for a week. My staff is not prepared for something like that. I am not prepared." "Oh, mother-in-law," she exclaimed miraculously, recovering her enthusiasm. "Do not worry about anything. I have it all planned out. I hired additional staff for the kitchen and cleaning. I just need you to give me $10,000 to cover those extra expenses and buy some things to get the rooms ready." $10,000. Just like that. Like someone asking for a glass of water. I felt a knot in my stomach, a mixture of indignation and sadness. It was not the first time Michelle had asked me for money. In fact, it had become such a regular habit that she did not even bother to invent elaborate excuses anymore. "You already hired staff without consulting me?" I asked, feeling how the anger was beginning to boil inside me. "Of course, I wanted to save you the worry. I know how much you stress over the details." Her condescending tone pierced me like a dagger. "Besides, Charles is completely on board. He says it will be good for you to socialize a little more." My own son. My Charles. The boy I raised alone after his father abandoned us, the young man for whom I paid full tuition at college, the man whose dream wedding I financed down to the last detail. that same son was now deciding without consulting me that my house would be invaded by a horde of strangers. I looked out the window toward the garden I had designed with so much love, where every rose, every bush had been chosen personally. I thought about my quiet mornings reading on the terrace, my afternoons playing bridge with my friends, my nights watching old movies in the cozy silence of my living room. All of that was about to disappear under an avalanche of suitcases, unknown voices, demands, and chaos. And it was in that precise moment, while I watched Michelle casually looking around my living room as if evaluating which furniture would need to be moved to accommodate her guests, that something inside me broke. Or perhaps thinking about it properly. It did not break, it straightened up, like a spine that after years of being hunched over finally recovers its correct posture. I did not know then that this unexpected announcement would be the beginning of the end of my life as I knew it. I did not know that I was about to discover a painful truth about my family and about myself. And I certainly did not know that in the coming weeks, I would be forced to take the most difficult and liberating decision of my life. The only thing I knew in that moment was that something had to change, and that for the first time in many years, that change would have to start with me. If someone had told me 20 years ago that my generosity would become my greatest weakness, I would have laughed. I, Sophia Montero, widow of the most respected businessman in the city, was always known for my open heart and my generous hand. Perhaps too generous, as I realize now while I watch Michelle disappear through my front door with my checkbook $10,000 lighter and a smile of satisfaction on her face. My late husband Edward always told me, "Sophia, your kindness is your treasure, but it can also be your ruin." In those days, I simply smiled and kept doing what I considered right, helping those I loved, especially our only son, Charles. I remember the day of his graduation from college as if it were yesterday. The central plaza of the State University full of caps and gowns, and my Charles so handsome and brilliant, receiving his degree in business administration. I cried with pride while Edward applauded loudly. That night, we gave him the keys to his first apartment, completely paid for by us, a gift that cost more than $300,000. "Mom, I cannot accept it," Charles said with tears in his eyes. "Son, your father and I want you to start your adult life without worries." I replied, hugging him. "It is our gift to you." Edward died 2 years later, a massive heart attack while playing golf, his passion. Suddenly, I found myself alone at 62 years old with a considerable fortune and a son who had just met Michelle at his work. I still remember the first time Charles brought her home. Michelle, with her black hair perfectly styled and her tight red dress, walked into my mansion, looking at every detail like someone evaluating a property for sale. Her eyes stopped on the rare paintings that Edward had collected on the antiques brought from Europe on the Ming Dynasty vases. "Your house is impressive, Mrs. Montero," she said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Charles has told me so much about you and your generosity." I should have noticed it then, the way she said generosity, like someone pronouncing the name of easy prey. But I was so happy to see my son in love that I ignored all the signs. 6 months later, Charles announced their engagement. A year later, I paid for a wedding for 300 people at the country club estate. $80,000 in flowers, food, music, and a wedding dress brought especially from Paris. "It is too much, Mom," Charles told me, but Michelle quickly intervened. "Your mother wants the best for us, my love. We cannot disappoint her." As a wedding gift, I gave them the down payment for a house in an exclusive gated community, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. $200,000 that came out of my savings without a second thought. "It is an investment in your future," I told them while I signed the check. The years passed and my generosity knew no limits. When they needed to remodel the kitchen of their house, I was there with $30,000. When Charles wanted to trade his car for the latest model Mercedes, I signed a check for $60,000. When Michelle mentioned that she had always dreamed of seeing Europe, I gifted them a month-long trip through the most beautiful capitals of the continent. $50,000 in five-star hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, and shopping in the most exclusive boutiques. "Mom, I do not know how to thank you," Charles would tell me every time with sincere gratitude in his eyes. "You do not have to thank me, son. That is what I am here for." I would reply, happy to be able to give them the life I considered they deserved. What I did not see or did not want to see was how Michelle began to expect these gifts, how they stopped being surprises to become expectations, how her thank yous became shorter, more automatic, like someone thanking a waiter for bringing water to the table. I also did not notice how Charles's visits became less frequent. From coming to see me 3 times a week, he went to a weekly visit, then every 2 weeks, until they became sporadic appearances, usually when they needed something. "We are very busy, Mom." He always apologized. "Work, you know." And I nodded, swallowing the loneliness like someone taking bitter medicine, telling myself that this was modern life, that young people had their own worries. The emergencies began approximately 2 years ago. First, they were small: $3,000 to fix a leak in the roof, $5,000 for a dental treatment that insurance did not cover. Then they became larger and more frequent. "Mom, we need $20,000 to invest in a business that a friend recommended to us. It is a unique opportunity." Charles told me a year ago. I signed the check without asking for details. 3 months later, when I asked about the business, Charles looked away. "It did not work out as we hoped," he murmured. Later, I discovered through the indiscretion of a mutual friend that there never was such an investment. The money had gone to a trip to Las Vegas and a diamond necklace for Michelle. Even so, I kept giving like a fountain that cannot stop flowing even if no one drinks from it. Because giving had become my way of feeling necessary, of keeping my son close, of believing that I still had a purpose in this world beyond growing old in a house too big for a single woman. And now, while I sit in my living room after Michelle has left with my promise of $10,000 more for her surprise guests, I ask myself, at what moment did my generosity turn into weakness? When did I stop being a loving mother to become an automatic bank that does not ask for explanations? I look at the photos of Edward on the mantle. His serious but kind face seems to watch me with a mixture of compassion and reproach. "You were right, Edward," I whisper to the photograph. "My kindness is becoming my ruin." Yeah, what I do not know yet is that this family invasion that is approaching will be just the beginning of a painful but necessary awakening, that soon I will discover how far the abuse of my generosity has really gone, and that against all odds, I will find inside me a strength that not even I knew I possessed. For now, I only know that I have less than a week to prepare to receive 20 strangers in my house, 20 people who come to enjoy my hospitality without having been invited, 20 people who, according to Michelle, are anxious to meet the millionaire mother-in-law they have heard so much about. I get up slowly and walk toward my bedroom. On the way, I pass in front of the family portrait we took when Charles was 10 years old. We were so happy then, so united. At what moment did we lose that? Was it my fault for giving too much? Or is it simply the natural course of life where children grow up and drift away, where love transforms into something unrecognizable? I do not have answers. I only know that something inside me is changing like a seed that has remained dormant under the snow, and that with the first rays of the spring sun begins slowly to wake up. There are moments in life when the truth hits you like an unexpected slap in the face. For me, that moment arrived on a Thursday afternoon, 3 days after Michelle's announcement about the family invasion that was coming. I was in my bedroom looking in my dresser for the keys to the safe where I kept my most valuable jewelry. With 20 strangers about to invade my house, I had decided to lock away the emeralds that Edward gave me on our 20th anniversary and the pearl necklace I inherited from my mother. It is not that I distrusted Michelle's family. I told myself it was simple precaution. While I was rummaging through the drawers, I found a blue folder that I did not remember putting there. Upon opening it, I felt like the floor was opening up under my feet. It was a meticulous record of all the loans and gifts I had made to Charles and Michelle in the last 5 years. Every check, every transfer, every cash delivery, everything written down in my trembling handwriting, along with the reason they had given me for needing the money. March 15th, 2023, $5,000 for emergency roof repair. April 28th, 2023, $3,000 for Michelle's dental treatment. June 10th, 2023, $8,000 for urgent stock investment. The list went on, page after page. At the end, I had summed up the total $487,000 in 5 years. Almost $500,000 that had come out of my savings, out of the inheritance that Edward had worked his whole life to leave me to ensure my old age. I sat on the edge of the bed feeling a sudden dizziness. It was not the money that hurt me, although the amount left me breathless. It was realizing that I had been keeping this account in secret even from myself, as if a part of me had been aware of the abuse, while another part refused to acknowledge it. I remembered every single one of those occasions. Charles calling with a worried voice, "Mom, we have an emergency." Michelle appearing at my door with watery eyes. Mother-in-law, we do not know who else to turn to. And me, always me, taking out the checkbook without asking questions, without asking for receipts, without verifying if the emergencies were real. How many of those emergencies had been invented? On how many occasions had my money ended up financing luxuries instead of necessities? As if answering my silent questions, my phone vibrated with a notification from Instagram. It was a post from Michelle's sister, Alexandra, one of the ones who would be coming to stay in my house. The photo showed Michelle at a luxury spa wrapped in a white robe with a glass of champagne in her hand. The caption said, "Getting ready for the big family reunion at the mansion, thanks to the generosity of a certain millionaire mother-in-law. #luxury life, #sugar granny, #free money." The date of the post, yesterday. The same day, Michelle had asked me for $10,000 for emergency expenses related to the family visit. I felt something break inside me. It was not just the money. It was the mockery, the audacity, the way my daughter-in-law bragged to the world about how she took advantage of me. As if I were a joke and ATM, without feelings, a foolish old woman they could manipulate at their whim. With trembling hands, I continued exploring Michelle's family's social media. On Facebook, her cousin Ryan had posted, "A week at the millionaire aunt's mansion. Pool full service, and who knows what surprises the lady has prepared for us. They say she is so generous she gives away money as if it were candy." And the comments underneath were even worse. "Take advantage, cousin. Get everything you can out of her before she realizes." Michelle is a genius. 5 years squeezing the mother-in-law, and the old lady does not even have a clue. Bring me something expensive as a souvenir. She surely has closets full of things she does not even use. The tears began to run down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were of rage, of indignation, of a fury I had never felt before. All my life, I had been the kind woman, the understanding mother, the perfect mother-in-law who never complained, who was always willing to help. And this was how they repaid me. I kept investigating now with a cold determination that replaced the initial shock. I found photos of Michelle wearing jewelry that I had not given her, expensive jewelry that had surely been bought with my money. Photos of Charles and her in exclusive restaurants on nights when they were supposedly too busy to visit me. Images of secret vacations, extravagant purchases, luxurious parties. And then I saw it. A direct message between Michelle and her sister Alexandra that someone had screenshot and shared in a private group, but which had leaked into the public comments. "Are you sure the old lady doesn't suspect anything?" asked Alexandra. "Not at all," replied Michelle. "She is so desperate to feel loved that she would give us down to her last penny if we asked for it. I already got $10,000 out of her for the visit, but I plan to ask her for at least another $15,000 when everyone is here. You know, for unforeseen expenses. Besides, I have my eyes on her emeralds. I have been suggesting that she leave them to me in her will, but I think I could convince her to give them to me before. After all, what use are they to an old woman who barely leaves the house? The phone fell from my hands. I felt nauseous, a physical pain in my chest, as if I had been stabbed. It was not just the money, not even the jewelry. It was the cruelty, the contempt, the way they referred to me. The old woman. As if my 67 years had turned me into an object without value, without dignity, without the right to respect. I stood up wobbling and went to the full-length mirror I had in my room. I saw an older woman, yes, with wrinkles that told stories of laughter and tears, with gray hair that spoke of wisdom earned with the years. But I also saw a woman who had allowed her dignity to be trampled on, who had confused love with servitude, generosity with self-erasure. Enough, I said out loud to my reflection. It is over. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I dried my tears, took a deep breath, and walked down the stairs. It was Charles, my son, coming to check on the preparations for the family visit. I looked at him as if I were seeing him for the first time. This handsome 40-year-old man dressed in expensive clothes, bought with my money, driving a luxury car that I had financed, living a life that I had subsidized. This son I had raised with so much love, and who now allowed and even participated in this cruel mockery of his own mother. Mom Michelle told me she already explained everything to you about the visit, he said with a smile that now seemed fake to me. I am coming to see which rooms we can use and to make a list of what we will need. I felt a strange calm like the one that precedes great storms, a mental clarity I had not experienced in years. Of course, son, I replied with a smile that did not reach my eyes. Let us talk about what they need. Let us talk about everything you have been needing these years. I did not know then that this conversation would mark the beginning of the end of an era in my life, that it would be the first step toward a liberation I never believed possible. That inside me, a new woman was being born, one who would no longer confuse love with abuse, generosity with exploitation. The only thing I knew was that something fundamental had changed, and that for the first time in many years, the decisions I would take from now on would be for me and by me, not out of fear of loneliness, not out of a misunderstood sense of maternal duty, not out of guilt or manipulation. The storm was approaching, and I, Sophia Montero, was finally ready to face it. There are moments that mark a before and after in life. For me, that moment arrived while I was serving coffee to my son, Charles, on the terrace of my house, with the evidence of his betrayal still fresh in my mind. "So, Mom," said Charles, checking his phone distractedly, "Michelle mentioned that she already asked you for the money for the extra expenses of the visit." I set the cup of coffee in front of him with a calm I did not feel. The afternoon sun bathed the garden that with so much love I had cultivated for years, just as I had cultivated my relationship with this son, who now looked at me like someone looks at an ATM. "Yes, she asked me for $10,000, I replied, sitting across from him. "A considerable amount." Charles made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "Well, it is a lot of people, Mom. We have to feed them, prepare the rooms, hire extra help. You know how these things are." "No, Charles, I do not know how these things are," I said with a voice I did not recognize as mine. "I have never invited 20 people to stay in someone else's house without their permission. I've never bragged on social media about how I take advantage of an old woman's generosity." His face went pale. The coffee cup remained suspended halfway to his lips. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "I saw the posts, Charles. The ones from Michelle at the spa celebrating how she got $10,000 out of me. The ones from her sister making fun of me. the ones from her cousins planning to squeeze me dry during their stay here. Charles set the cup on the table with trembling hands. For a moment, I saw in his eyes the boy he once was, scared at being caught in a prank. But quickly that expression was replaced by another, calculating defensive. "They are just jokes, Mom. Do not take them seriously. You know how social media is." Is it also a joke that Michelle plans to ask me for another $15,000 during the visit, or that she has her eyes on my emeralds? His face transformed into a mask of guilt. I did not need more confirmation. "Mom, it is not what you think, okay?" "Then tell me what it is, Charles. Explain to me why your wife refers to me as the old woman. Explain to me why you allow your in-laws to mock your mother. Explain to me why, in the last 5 years, you've taken almost $500,000 from me in supposed emergencies." I took out the blue folder and placed it on the table between us. Charles looked at it like someone looks at a poisonous snake. "I have kept count, every peso, every dollar. Not because I care about the money, but because a part of me always knew that something was not right. A part of me that I silenced because I did not want to lose my only son." Charles went from panic to indignation in seconds. A transition that painfully reminded me of Michelle's tactics. "Are you accusing me of robbing you your own son after everything you have done for me? Do you think I need your money?" "I do not know, Charles. You tell me. Why does a man with a good job, a paid-off house, and a luxury car constantly need money from his widowed mother? Why does your wife, who does not work but wears designer clothes and goes to exclusive spas, need me to finance her whims?" He stood up abruptly, knocking the chair backward. "I do not have to listen to this. If it bothers you so much to help us, simply say so. You do not have to invent ridiculous conspiracies." "They are not conspiracies, Charles. They are screenshots. They are direct messages. They are public posts where your wife and her family treat me like a senile idiot they can manipulate at their whim." I took out my phone and showed him the evidence one by one. With every image, with every message, his face lost color. When I reached the conversation where Michelle spoke of my emeralds, Charles could no longer hold my gaze. This is out of context," he stammered. "Michelle was joking." Was she also joking when she used the $20,000 she asked me for an urgent investment on a trip to Las Vegas and a diamond necklace? His eyes opened wide with surprise. "How do you know that? The world is small, son. Friends talk photos or shared secrets come to light." He let himself fall into the chair again, defeated. For a moment I felt pity for him. This man I had raised with so much love, whom I had educated to be honest and respectful, now reduced to a discovered liar. "It was not my idea," he murmured finally. "Michelle, she has expensive tastes. She always wants more. She is never satisfied with what we have. And are you satisfied with becoming the accomplice of someone who mocks your mother, with allowing your wife to treat me like a bank and not like a human being with feelings?" He did not answer. His silence was more eloquent than any excuse he could have invented. "Charles, I have given you everything, not just money. I gave you my life, my love, my trust. I worked 2 jobs after your father abandoned us so you could have the best education. I gave up opportunities, relationships, dreams of my own to dedicate myself to you, not because I was a martyr, but because you are my son, and I love you more than anything in this world." The tears ran down my cheeks, but my voice remained firm. "And now I discover that for you and your wife, I am just the old woman, a source of easy money, a joke you laugh about in private. Do you have any idea how much that hurts?" He finally raised his gaze. There were tears in his eyes too, but I did not know if they were of shame of guilt or simply of fear for having been discovered. "I am sorry, Mom. I do not know what to say." "Do not say anything then. Just listen. The family visit that Michelle has organized without my consent will be the last time I allow my generosity to be abused. Starting today, things are going to change. He straightened up in the chair, alarmed. What do you mean? I mean that there will be no more loans that are never repaid, no more emergencies that turn out to be whims, no more treating me as if my only value were my bank account. But Mom, the visit, everything is already organized. The tickets bought, the expectations created. Oh, the visit will still happen, I said with a smile that made him shudder, but not how Michelle has planned it. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Charles and I looked at each other. We knew who it was even before the housekeeper announced her arrival. Mrs. Michelle is here, said Rosie from the terrace door. Show her in, please, I replied without looking away from my son. Seconds later, Michelle appeared on the terrace with her usual whirlwind of energy and expensive perfume. She was wearing a new dress that I had never seen, probably bought with my money, and a smile that froze on her face upon seeing our expressions. Am I interrupting something? She asked, looking alternately at Charles and me. Not at all, dear, I replied, standing up. In fact, you arrived just in time. Charles and I were talking about your family's visit. Oh, wonderful, she exclaimed, recovering her enthusiasm. I was actually coming to bring you the final guest list and to pick up the check you promised me. I also wanted to ask you if we could use your French porcelain for the welcome dinner. You know, to impress everyone. I stared at her fixedly. This beautiful and calculating woman who had entered our lives like a Trojan horse, bringing destruction disguised as love. Michelle, sit down, please. We have to speak. Something in my tone must have alerted her because her smile faltered. She looked at Charles seeking support, but he only lowered his gaze. Is something wrong, mother-in-law? Yes, Michelle. It happens that I just had a revelation, an epiphany we could call it, about the value of respect, of honesty, and of dignity. I took my phone and slid it toward her across the table. On the screen, the screenshot of her conversation with her sister was open, where she referred to me as the old woman and spoke of my emeralds. The color drained from her face so quickly that for a moment I feared she might pass out. Her eyes darted frantically from the screen to Chris, then to me, and back to the screen again. This is not what it looks like, she stuttered. It is an inside joke, a misunderstanding. Save your explanations, Michelle. I have seen enough. The social media posts, the messages, the photos of how you both spend my money. Everything. She straightened up, changing tactics instantly. The feigned vulnerability gave way to indignation. Have you been spying on me? Checking my private conversations? What kind of mother-in-law does that? The kind of mother-in-law who finally opens her eyes after years of abuse and manipulation. I replied with a calm that disarmed her. The kind of mother-in-law who will no longer confuse generosity with stupidity. It was then that Michelle made the mistake that would seal her fate. In a last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation, she pulled out her most powerful weapon, tears. I cannot believe you think of me that way, she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. After everything I have done for you, taking care of you, visiting you, including you in our lives. If I have made mistakes, it has only been because I wanted the best for everyone, for our family. In the past, this performance would have worked. It would have made me feel guilty. It would have made me doubt my own perceptions. It would have led me to apologize for making her feel bad, but not anymore. The blindfold had fallen from my eyes, and I saw with crystal clarity the manipulation behind every tear, behind every studied sob. Michelle, I said softly, save your performance for someone who might still believe it. I no longer can. Her sobbing stopped abruptly. She looked at me with a mixture of surprise and anger that confirmed everything I already knew. What do you mean? She asked. I mean that the rules of the game have changed. Your family's visit will go ahead because I am not the kind of person who cancels plans at the last minute, leaving others in the lurch. But there will be no more money. Not $10,000, not $15,000, not a single penny more. But I already hired extra staff. I already made promises." "You cannot do this to me," she screamed. "I can and I will. If you want to host your family, you will have to do it with your own money, or better yet, with the money I have given you over these years that you have squandered on luxuries and whims." She stood up furiously, completely forgetting her role as the hurt daughter-in-law. "You cannot treat me like this. I will tell everyone what you are really like. A bitter, stingy old woman who enjoys humiliating her family." "Go ahead," I replied without flinching. "Tell them whatever you want. Show them who you really are. I have already seen it clearly." She turned to Chris, who had remained silent during the entire exchange. "Say something. She is your mother. Control her." Those words, "control her," were the straw that broke the camel's back. The final confirmation of how they viewed me, not as a person with autonomy and dignity, but as a problem that needed to be controlled. Chris finally looked up. For an instant, I saw in his eyes a glimpse of the son I had raised, the man I had hoped he would become. "Michelle, stop," he said with a tired voice. "My mother is right. This has gone too far." Michelle looked at him as if he had grown a second head. "Are you on her side against your own wife?" "It is not about taking sides," he replied. "It is about recognizing that we have abused her generosity, that we have treated her poorly, that we owe her respect." For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. Was it possible that my son was finally seeing the truth, that he could redeem himself? But Michelle was not willing to give up so easily. She turned to me with eyes full of poison. "You will regret this, Sophia. No one humiliates me like this and gets away with it." "It is not a humiliation, Michelle. It is a lesson. About respect, about boundaries, about dignity. A lesson I should have taught you a long time ago." She grabbed her designer bag and headed for the door with furious steps. Before leaving, she turned one last time. "The visit is still on. My family arrives on Friday, and we will see who has the last word in all this." When the door closed behind her, Chris and I were left in a heavy silence. Finally, he spoke. "I am sorry, Mom." "I am sorry too, son, for both of us." We looked at each other across the table, separated not only by the polished wood, but by years of disappointments, of unspoken truths, of crossed boundaries. "What are you going to do now?" he asked with a trembling voice. I looked toward the garden, toward the sky that was beginning to be tinged with the colors of the sunset. For the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of freedom, as if I had lifted a weight I had been carrying without realizing it. "Now, Chris, I am going to do something I should have done a long time ago. I am going to think about myself." I did not know then that those words would mark the beginning of the most bold and liberating decision of my life, that in the coming days, while Michelle's family prepared to invade me, I would be preparing my own surprise. A surprise that would forever change the balance of power in our relationship. The only thing I knew with certainty was that the Sophia who had allowed the abuse, the manipulation, and the lack of respect had died that afternoon, and from her ashes a new woman was being born, stronger, wiser, and above all, freer. Friday arrived faster than I expected. After my confrontation with Chris and Michelle, the days passed in a strange limbo. Chris tried to call me several times, but I let the calls go to voicemail. I needed time to think, to plan to find my way in this new reality, where I was no longer the compliant mother and mother-in-law that everyone took for granted. At 9 in the morning, while I was having breakfast on my terrace, enjoying the morning sun, Rosie, my trusted housekeeper for the last 15 years, approached with a worried expression. "Mrs. Sophia, Mrs. Michelle just called. She says she and her family will arrive around 2 in the afternoon. She asks if she can send some suitcases and boxes in advance with the driver." I smiled at the audacity. Not even after our confrontation had Michelle given up on her plans to use my house as a luxury hotel for her family. "Tell her she can bring whatever she wants, Rosie, but that I will not be here to receive them." Rosie's eyes widened with surprise. In 15 years, I had never missed my duties as a hostess. "Is the madam going out?" "Yes, Rosie, I am going out, and I need you to help me with something very important." I explained my plan to her. With every word, her expression went from surprise to understanding, and finally to a complicit smile. Rosie had been a silent witness to years of abuse and manipulation. She had seen how Michelle treated me when she thought no one else was watching, how Chris had gradually transformed from a loving son into a man who only appeared when he needed something. "It will be a pleasure to help you, ma'am," she said when I finished explaining. "It is about time." I spent the morning preparing. I called my lawyer a discreet and efficient man who had handled Edward's legal affairs and now mine. I explained what I needed, and although surprised, he agreed to have everything ready for that same afternoon. Then I called my bank and gave precise instructions regarding my accounts. The manager, who had known me for decades, asked me several times if I was sure. "More sure than ever," I replied. At 12:30, I went up to my room to change. Instead of the conservative and discreet dresses I used to wear, I chose an intense red pantsuit that Edward had given me on our last anniversary, which I had never had the courage to wear. I applied my makeup with care, highlighting my eyes with an eyeliner I had not used in years. I put on the emeralds, those that Michelle coveted so much, and completed the outfit with black heels that had remained in their box since I bought them on impulse during a trip to Paris. When I came down the stairs, Rosie looked at me with admiration. "You look beautiful, Mrs. Sophia." "Thank you, Rosie. I feel beautiful and strong." At 1:30, half an hour before the scheduled arrival of Michelle and her family, I left my house through the back door. My driver, Mike, was waiting for me with the car ready just as I had asked him that morning. "Where to, ma'am?" he asked as he opened the door for me. "To Mr. Reynolds' office first, Mike, and then to my new house." His expression of surprise almost made me laugh. "New house, ma'am. Yes, Mike, it is time for a change." As the car drove away down the tree-lined street where I had lived for the last 30 years, I looked out the back window at the mansion that Edward and I had turned into our home. So many memories, so many moments of happiness, and also of pain. But it was no longer my prison. It was no longer the stage where others decided my role. In Mr. Reynolds' office, I signed the documents I had requested that morning. A new will replacing the previous one where Chris was the sole heir. Now the majority of my fortune would go to various foundations helping older women who were victims of abuse. Chris would receive an amount sufficient to live comfortably, but not to squander. And Michelle would receive nothing. I also signed the papers for the purchase of my new apartment, a luminous penthouse in a building with 24-hour security, where no one could enter without my express authorization. A place that would be mine alone, decorated to my taste, without painful memories or other people's expectations. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Sophia?" the lawyer asked as he stamped the documents. "It is a very drastic change." "I am more sure than ever, Mr. Reynolds. Sometimes drastic changes are exactly what we need." When I arrived at my new home, it was almost 4 in the afternoon. The apartment was exactly as I had seen it the previous week when I visited it in secret. Spacious, bright, with a terrace offering a spectacular view of the city. The furniture I had selected was already in place, along with some of my personal belongings that Rosie had helped move discreetly over the last few days. I sat on the sofa in front of the large windows, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed deeply. The silence surrounding me was not the oppressive silence of a house too big for a lonely woman. It was a silence of peace, of possibilities, of freedom. At 4:30, my phone began to ring non-stop. First Michelle, then Chris, then unknown numbers that I assumed were Michelle's relatives who had arrived at an empty house with only a note waiting for them. The note read, "Welcome to the Miller Mansion. As you can see, I have decided not to join you during your stay. The house is at your disposal with all the amenities it offers, but without additional funds. The refrigerator is stocked for 2 days. After that, you will have to take care of your own food and necessities. Rosie and the rest of the staff have instructions not to accept orders that involve additional expenses. Enjoy your stay, but know that the rules have changed. Sophia. I imagined Michelle's face reading that note. The disbelief, the anger, the panic upon realizing that her perfect plan had crumbled, that the old woman she thought she had controlled had disappeared, taking with her the unlimited access to her fortune. At 5 o'clock, I finally decided to answer a call from Chris. "Mom, where are you?" What does this note mean? Michelle is furious, her family is confused, no one understands what is happening. "Hello, son," I replied calmly. "I am exactly where I want to be, far from people who see me as a bank and not as a human being." "But Mom, you cannot just leave like this. What are we supposed to do with all these people?" "Whatever you want, Chris. They can stay at the house as planned. They have a roof, comfortable beds, a beautiful garden. What they do not have is me to finance their whims. But Michelle already promised parties, excursions, gifts for everyone. That is Michelle's problem, not mine. Maybe it is time she learns not to promise what she cannot deliver." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Chris spoke again, his voice sounded different, smaller, more vulnerable. "Are you coming back, Mom?" "No, Chris, I am not coming back. At least not as the person you knew. I have sold the mansion." "What?" His scream was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You sold our house without consulting me, without thinking of me." The house was mine, son. Just like the money you and Michelle have been spending as if it were water. And yes, I have sold it. The new owner will take possession in 2 weeks. Until then, you can stay there if you want. After that, you will have to look for another place for your family gatherings. "You cannot do this to us," he said, and for the first time I heard in his voice the same manipulative tone that Michelle had perfected. "We are your family, your only family." "You are wrong, Chris. You are my son, and you always will be. But that does not give you the right to treat me the way you have. It does not give you the right to allow your wife to disrespect me, to mock me, to view me as an ATM without feelings. Mom, please, we can fix this. I can talk to Michelle, make her apologize." "I do not want forced apologies, son. I want genuine respect. And if you cannot give me that, then it is better that our paths separate for a while." "Are you disinheriting me?" His voice was trembling now, and I did not know if it was out of fear of losing his inheritance or the realization that he was losing his mother. "No, Chris, you will continue to receive enough to live comfortably, but the majority of my fortune will go to those who really need it, to women who, like me, have been manipulated and abused by those who should love and protect them." Another silence, this one longer than the previous one. When he spoke again, his voice sounded defeated. "Where are you, Mom? Let me come see you. Let's talk in person." "No, Chris. I am not ready for that yet. I need time. Time to heal, to rediscover myself, to learn to live on my own terms." "What if I need you if there is a real emergency?" "My lawyer has instructions to contact me if there is a true emergency. But I warn you, son, this time he will verify every detail before bothering me." A sob came from the other end of the line. Were they real tears or another manipulation I could no longer distinguish, and that was perhaps the saddest thing of all. "I love you, Mom," he said finally. "Despite everything, I love you." "I love you too, Chris. I always have and I always will. But I have learned that sometimes loving someone means setting boundaries, and that is exactly what I am doing." I hung up before he could respond. Tears ran down my cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness or regret. They were tears of liberation, of catharsis, of a woman who had finally found her voice and her strength. I stood up and walked to the terrace of my new home. The sun began to set, painting the sky in reddish and golden tones. Below, the city buzzed with life, with possibilities, with futures to be discovered. At 67 years old, many would think it was too late to start over, too late to redefine myself, to seek happiness on my own terms. But as I gazed at the horizon, I knew with absolute certainty that it was not so. It was not too late. In fact, I was just getting started. I took out my phone and opened an application I had downloaded that morning. New Beginnings, it was called. A group for older women looking to reconnect with their passions, make new friendships, explore abandoned interests. There was an event that very evening, a poetry reading at a nearby bookstore, followed by a casual dinner. For women who have stories to tell and ears willing to listen, the description said. Without thinking twice, I confirmed my attendance. Then I went into my new bedroom, opened the closet full of clothes I had never dared to wear, and chose a blue dress I had bought years ago, but had always considered too flashy for a woman of my age. Tonight, there would be no too much. There would be no self-imposed limitations nor expectations of others to fulfill. Just me, Sophia Miller, a woman who had finally understood that respect begins with oneself. While I was getting ready to go out, I thought about Michelle and her family, trapped in a mansion that would soon cease to be theirs, with grandiose plans they could not fulfill, with empty promises crumbling like a house of cards. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Was I being too harsh, too radical in my decision? But then I remembered the mockery, the deception, the way they had abused my trust and my love for years. I remembered how they had made me feel insignificant, used disposable. No, I was not being too harsh. I was being fair. To myself, above all. I took my bag, the keys to my new apartment, and went out to face the world with a confidence I had not felt in decades. I did not know what the future held for me, but for the first time in a long time, that unknown did not terrify me. It excited me. Because I had discovered a fundamental truth that many women take a lifetime to understand. It is never too late to reclaim your dignity, to set boundaries, to demand respect. It is never too late to say, enough. This far and no further. From now on, I make the rules. Time has a curious way of flowing when one finally finds their path. It has been 6 months since I left my old life behind, and sometimes it seems like it was yesterday, while other times I feel as if I have lived more in this half year than in the previous decades. My new apartment no longer feels new. It has become my sanctuary, my refuge, the space where I can be completely myself without anyone else's expectations. The walls, once bare, are now decorated with paintings I have carefully selected in local galleries. Not for their monetary value or prestige, as Edward would have done, but because each one speaks to me in some way, moves me, inspires me. The terrace has transformed into a small urban garden, with pots overflowing with flowers and aromatic herbs. Every morning I have breakfast there, watching the city wake up while I enjoy a coffee prepared exactly how I like it, without having to worry about pleasing anyone else's tastes. But the most profound change is not in my environment, but in myself. The Sophia who dared to say, enough, that Friday has continued her metamorphosis, discovering facets of herself that had remained dormant for too long. The group New Beginnings has become a fundamental part of my life. That first night of poetry reading, I met Helen, a retired university professor with a contagious laugh and a brilliant mind. I met Pam, a widow like me, who had found in painting a way to process her grief, and Carol, a former executive who at 70 years old had decided to fulfill her childhood dream of becoming a cultural tour guide. Strong, interesting women with stories to tell, and wounds they had transformed into wisdom. Women who, like me, had decided that the last stage of their lives would not be a silent appendix, but a vibrant chapter written on their own terms. With them, I have rediscovered forgotten pleasures. Experimental theater jazz concerts in small clubs, walks through historic neighborhoods, conversations that stretch until dawn about books, politics, art, and life. I've learned to use the technology that used to intimidate me. Now I handle apps, social media, and digital platforms with an ease that would have surprised the Sophia of a year ago. I have also returned to studying. I enrolled in an art history diploma at the local college, fulfilling a desire I had postponed first for my marriage, then for motherhood, and finally for that inertia that makes us believe it is already too late to learn new things. Turns out it is not late at all. My mind, far from being rusty as I feared, has blossomed with the stimulation. My professors, much younger than me, treat me with respect but without condescension. My classmates of all ages include me in their discussions and value my perspectives. For the first time in a long time, I feel seen for who I am, not for what I can give or provide. And then there is Robert, the art philosophy professor I met at a lecture 3 months ago. A 65-year-old man with kind eyes, expressive hands, and a way of listening that makes you feel every word of yours is important. I do not know if what we have will turn into something more than this warm friendship we are building, but I have rediscovered the pleasure of anticipation, of conversations that last for hours, of the butterflies in the stomach when his name appears on my phone screen. Of course not everything has been easy. There have been nights of doubt, moments when guilt has assaulted me like a thief in the dark. Was I too harsh? Too radical in my break? Should I have tried harder, explained better, given another chance? In those moments, I take out the folder where I keep screenshots of those cruel messages, of those mockeries, of those plans to squeeze me dry. I reread them not to feed the resentment, but to remind myself that my decision was not a whim or an outburst. It was an act of self-love, of emotional survival, of dignity reclaimed. Chris has tried to contact me several times in these months, at first with anger, then with pleas, finally with apparent acceptance. We have spoken on the phone on a few occasions, tense but civilized conversations. He has told me that he and Michelle have moved to a smaller apartment, that they have had to adjust their lifestyle, insyu as he calls it. I feel no satisfaction in their difficulties, but neither do I feel guilt. Every adult must take responsibility for their decisions, and they took theirs when they decided to treat me like an inexhaustible source of resources, instead of a human being with feelings and dignity. A month ago, Chris asked to see me in person. We agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop, a terrain that belonged neither to his world nor to mine. When I saw him walk in, I was surprised by how different he looked. Thinner, with some new gray hairs, with an expression less arrogant and more reflective. "You look good, Mom," was the first thing he said to me. Different, but good. "I feel good," I replied sincerely. Better than I have felt in years. Our conversation was like walking on thin ice, careful measuring every word, aware that a false step could break the fragile connection we were trying to rebuild. He told me that Michelle and he were in couples therapy, that the shock of losing access to my fortune had triggered crises and revelations in their marriage, that they were learning to live with what they earned, to value what they had, to build a relationship based on something more than materialism and appearances. "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "There were moments when I thought we wouldn't make it." Michelle was furious. She blamed me for not having controlled you better. He paused, looking at his coffee as if it held answers. That was when I realized how toxic everything had become, how we had treated you, what we had done to you. I said nothing. I did not need to. For the first time in a long time, my son was truly seeing me, listening to me, even in my silence. "I am sorry, Mom," he said finally with tears in his eyes. "I am sorry for failing you as a son. I am sorry for allowing them to treat you like that. I am sorry for being so blind, so selfish." I reached my hand across the table and took his. "I also have my share of responsibility, Chris. I allowed it to happen. I confused love with servility, generosity with self-cancellation. I did not set clear boundaries." that doesn't justify what we did. No, it doesn't justify it, but it helps us understand it and not repeat it. He asked me if one day I could forgive them, him and Michelle. I told him the truth, that forgiveness is a process, not an event, that I was working on it day by day, that perhaps we would never have the relationship we had before, but we could build a new one based on mutual respect and healthy boundaries. Before saying goodbye, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for a considerable amount, though far less than what they had taken from me over the years. "It is a start," he said. "We can't pay you back everything at once, but Michelle and I have agreed that every month we will set aside a part of our income to pay you what we owe you." I looked at the check surprised not by the amount, but by the gesture itself. "It is not necessary, Chris. I do not expect you to return the money." "I know, Mom, but we need to do it. Not just for you, but for us, for our integrity, for our conscience." I put the check in my purse, understanding that for my son, this was part of his own process of healing and redemption. We said goodbye with a tentative hug, the first in 6 months. It was not the effusive and confident hug we used to share, but neither was it the empty automatic gesture our encounters had become in recent years. It was an honest hug, a small bridge extended over the abyss we ourselves had created. "Can we see each other again?" he asked before leaving. "Maybe lunch next month." "I would like that," I replied, and I meant it. That night, reflecting on our meeting in the solitude of my terrace, I understood that true power is not in controlling others, as Michelle had tried to do with me, nor in allowing others to control you, as I had done for so long. True power lies in autonomy, in the ability to set healthy boundaries, in the courage to say no when necessary, and yes when it is authentic. It lies in recognizing your own value not as something others determine, but as something inherent to your existence. At 67 years old, I have learned that it is never too late to reclaim that power. That life does not end when the children grow up, when the partner departs, when the body begins to show the signs of time. That in fact it can be the beginning of the most authentic and fulfilling stage if we have the courage to imagine it and build it. Tomorrow I have a date with Robert. We are going to visit a contemporary art exhibition and then have dinner at a small restaurant he knows. I will wear my emerald green dress, the one that matches my eyes, and the silver earrings I bought myself for my birthday. I do not know what the future holds for me. I do not know if Chris and I will manage to rebuild our relationship on healthier foundations. I do not know if Robert will become something more than a dear friend. I do not know how many more years I will have to enjoy this newly discovered freedom. What I do know is that every day is an opportunity to honor my truth, to live with authenticity, to give and receive respect, and that more than any material fortune is the legacy I want to leave in this world. Because in the end, what really matters is not how much money we accumulate, how many possessions we acquire, or how much we please others. What matters is having lived a life we can truly call our own. A life where, even in the darkest moments, we have had the courage to defend our dignity and claim our right to happiness. And that is exactly what I am doing now. One day at a time, one step at a time, with the quiet certainty of someone who has finally found her way back to herself. There are moments in life that mark a before and an after. For me, that moment arrived exactly 1 year ago when I decided to put an end to decades of manipulation and emotional abuse, when I chose to value myself above the expectations of others, when I dared to say, enough, and reclaim my dignity. Today, on the first anniversary of my rebirth, I find myself sitting on the terrace of my apartment, watching the sunset while writing these reflections in the journal Helen gave me for my birthday. "So you can document your journey," she told me, "so you never forget how far you have come." And boy, have I come far. The art history diploma. I started as a shy approach to my postponed interests has turned into a formal master's degree. At 68 years old, I am the oldest student in my class. But far from feeling out of place, I have discovered that my life experience brings a unique perspective to academic discussions. My professors value my analysis. My classmates, many young enough to be my grandchildren, seek my opinion and share with me their own perspectives in an exchange that keeps me mentally and emotionally stimulated. The group New Beginnings has expanded under my co-leadership, along with Helen. What started as a small circle of older women seeking reconnection has become a vibrant community of more than 50 people, organizing everything from creative writing workshops to cultural trips, including volunteer projects in schools and hospitals. We've created a space where age is not a limitation, but a strength, where every wrinkle tells a story of overcoming, where every gray hair is a testament to earned wisdom. Robert and I have built a relationship that defies conventional labels. It is not a teenage romance nor a traditional marriage, but a conscious companionship based on mutual respect, intellectual admiration, and yes, a passion that I discovered with surprise has no expiration date. We spend 3 or 4 days a week together enjoying art exhibitions, concerts, long conversations about philosophy and literature, and quiet nights cooking together, or simply gazing at the stars from my terrace. But we also value our independence, our personal spaces, our individual routines. It is a balance I never knew in my marriage to Edward, where total fusion was the norm, and any desire for autonomy was seen as a threat to the relationship. My relationship with Chris has evolved in ways I could not have predicted. After our first meeting at the coffee shop, we have maintained monthly lunches that have gradually become less tense and more genuine. He has kept his promise to pay me back the money, not because I need it or demand it, but because he needs to do it as part of his own process of redemption. Michelle and I maintain a cordial distance. We are not friends, nor will we be, but we have reached a mutual respect that seemed impossible a year ago. Couples therapy seems to have given her perspective, or perhaps it was simply the shock of losing her source of easy funding. Whatever the reason, she is no longer the manipulative and dismissive woman who mocked the old lady behind my back. The last time we saw each other at Chris's birthday, she even thanked me for teaching them a necessary lesson, although I noticed it cost her to pronounce those words. The money Chris has been paying me back, along with part of the proceeds from the sale of the mansion, I have channeled into a foundation I created 6 months ago, Silver Dignity. We work with older women who have been victims of emotional, financial, or physical abuse, offering them everything from legal advice to psychological support and tools to rebuild their lives. Every time one of these women takes the step to set boundaries, to say, "No more," I feel that my own story acquires a deeper meaning, that my pain transforms into purpose. This morning, while checking my email, I found a message that left me breathless. It was from a woman named Louise, 72 years old, who had attended one of our workshops at Silver Dignity 3 months ago. When she came to us, she could barely speak without crying. Her son and daughter-in-law had taken control of her finances, isolated her from her friendships, and treated her like a child incapable of making decisions. Dear Sophia. Her message read, "Today I signed the papers to regain control of my bank accounts. My lawyer, the one you recommended, has been an angel. My son is furious. My daughter-in-law is not talking to me. But for the first time in years, I can breathe without feeling that weight on my chest. Yesterday, I slept through the night without nightmares. I know the road will be difficult, that there will be days when guilt and loneliness will make me doubt. But then I remember your words. Your dignity is non-negotiable. Thank you for showing me that it is never too late to reclaim your life. Thank you for being the light that guided me out of my darkness." I read her message 3 times, tears rolling down my cheeks. Tears not of sadness, but of deep gratitude for having found this purpose, this way of transforming my pain into something that helps others find their own path to freedom. This evening, Robert is coming to dinner. We've also invited Helen and her new companion, a retired architect with a passion for photography and jazz. I will cook my signature seafood dish, a specialty newly discovered thanks to the cooking classes I took last winter. We will open a bottle of special wine that I have been saving for this occasion and toast to this year of discoveries of growth of second chances. While I set the table on the terrace, placing fresh flowers and candles that I will light when night falls, I think of the woman I was a year ago, scared but determined, wounded, but finding her strength, taking a leap of faith into the unknown. I wish I could tell her, everything will be okay, more than okay. You will find parts of yourself you didn't even know existed. You will build a life you never imagined possible. You will meet people who will value you for who you are not, for what you can give them. You will discover that true freedom lies not in doing whatever you want, but in not doing what you don't want. And above all, you will learn that it is never, never too late to begin again. The doorbell rings. It is Robert, arriving early as always, probably with a book he wants to share with me or an idea for our next trip. I look at myself in the mirror before opening the door. I see a 68-year-old woman with wrinkles that tell stories of laughter and tears, with gray hair that speaks of experiences, and wisdom with eyes that shine with a vitality they didn't have when they were framed by a younger but less free face. I see a woman who has completed a circle, who has returned to herself after decades of living for others. A woman who finally understood that self-respect is not selfishness, that boundaries are not walls, but doors that carefully choose whom to let in, that true generosity is born from inner abundance and not from the fear of loneliness or rejection. I open the door with a smile that is born from the deepest part of my being. Robert greets me with a warm hug and a soft kiss. "You look radiant," he tells me, and for the first time in my life, I completely believe someone who gives me a compliment because I know it is true. I am radiant. I am alive. I am finally and unapologetically being fully myself. And there is no greater freedom than that. Has this story inspired you? Sophia's journey shows us that it is never too late to start over and live authentically. Her transformation from a life controlled by others to a full and independent existence at 70 is a powerful reminder for all of us. Share your opinion. Leave us a comment telling us which part of Sophia's story moved you the most, or if you have lived through a similar personal transformation. Your experiences can inspire others who are looking for the courage to change their lives. Do not miss our upcoming inspiring stories. Subscribe now to our channel to receive new weekly tales, reflections on aging with dignity, and real stories of personal overcoming. Just click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Together, we can inspire more people to find the courage to rewrite their own stories, no matter their age.